Hello, and welcome. Welcome on into the Swear Word. I'm your host, Brandon Swear, and hey, this is a podcast for the chilihead community, by the chilihead community. Regardless of your spice tolerance, this is the place for you. Up tonight, we're going to be talking about expanding the horizons here, the future of the Swear Word podcast, the overall community, the value, and the growth that this impact has. So episode 193 starts now. What's going on, Swear Nation? So glad to have everyone here. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Spotify, Rumble, and or Apple Podcasts, thank you so much for being here and continuing to make this podcast what it is. First of all, thank you all so much for spending even a little bit of your day with me. Seriously, out of all the podcasts, all the videos, the music, everything else that's competing for your attention today, you chose to spend some of your time here, and I do not take that lightly. So thank you again for that. Time is one of those few things in life that every single one of us has only a limited number of. Once it's gone, it's gone. So if you're choosing to press play today, thank you so much for being here. And whether this is your very first episode or you've been listening since nearly the beginning, I genuinely appreciate every single one of you being here. So today's episode is going to be a little bit different. There isn't going to be a guest sitting across from me or on a screen with me. There isn't a table full of hot sauce awaiting to be tasted. There isn't a challenge planned. Instead, I wanted to have an honest conversation. One creator talking directly to the people who have made my journey absolutely possible. Because over the last several months, I've been doing a lot of thinking. And not just about peppers, not just about hot sauce, and not even just about podcasting. I've been thinking and asking myself much bigger questions. Like, what kind of impact do I actually want this podcast to have? That question has stayed in the back of my mind for a very long time. And honestly, I think that I've found the answer. So today, I want to take you behind the scenes. I want to tell you where the swear word has been and where it's going. Why some things are changing and why many things will never change. And maybe most importantly of all, why I continue showing up behind this here microphone after nearly 3 years. Because this podcast has become so much more than I've ever imagined. So let's go ahead and get into it. It started out of curiosity. And what's really kind of funny to look back at is when I first recorded that very first swear word episode, I honestly had no idea where this journey was going to lead. I wasn't sitting there at a table with all these investors. I didn't have this massive media giant behind me. I didn't have sponsors already lined up. I didn't even really have a giant audience waiting. I just simply had an idea, a great friend to give me a nudge and help me along this way, a microphone, a camera, and a love for spicy food. And honestly, the best part of it all was a genuine curiosity about it all and about the incredible people that make the community what it is. That right there was enough for me. And sometimes that's all it really takes. Just enough courage to start. And I think a lot of people wait for the perfect moment. They sit there and they worry about what's going to happen or how it's going to be received. And they may wait until they have that perfect camera or that perfect studio, that perfect logo, perfect plan, or, maybe that perfect amount of confidence. But that day almost never comes. You learn by doing. You improve by making mistakes. You grow by showing up. And that's exactly how this podcast began. One episode, then another, then another. Before I knew it, there were dozens, and then over 100. And now we are approaching something that honestly amazes me. When I stop to really think about it, over these almost 3 years now, I've had the privilege of sitting down with growers, hot sauce makers, business owners, content creators, friends, industry leaders, and people who simply just love peppers and spicy food. every single conversation has taught me something. Every guest has brought a different perspective. Every episode has made me a little more curious than I was before. And I hope that it's done the same for you. Curiosity has always been that real mission. So people often assume that the podcast is just simply about spicy food. And yes, that's a huge, huge part of it because I absolutely love peppers. I love hot sauce. I love discovering new products, and I love learning how different peppers grow and hearing about the origin stories behind them all. I love the science behind capsaicin. I love the competitions, the festivals, the community events, and everything that makes this industry so unique. But if I'm being completely honest here, that was never the entire reason I started. The real reason I started was curiosity. I've always wanted to know how someone built that company. And why did they create that sauce? A lot of us understand or know of the brand, but we don't know the person or team behind that brand. What inspired them? What got them there? What failure almost made them quit? What lesson has changed everything? I want to be able to take away things that I've learned from them, and maybe it can help me become a better person. Because that's something that I've realized over the years. The conversations are rarely just about the peppers. They're about perseverance. They're about creativity, the business, the family, the health, the friendships, the failures, the success, and the purpose behind it all. Those conversations are worth having. And that's when I realized that maybe this podcast has never been simply just about spicy food. Maybe it's always been about the curiosity. And maybe peppers are the thing that just happened to bring us all together. One of the greatest surprises over these past few years has been the people. Like, I absolutely genuinely believe the Chili Head community is one of the most welcoming communities I have ever been a part of. The people share seeds, recipes, advice, business ideas, and encouragement. They celebrate one another and they cheer for new companies. They start to support local makers and they help newcomers. And of course, like every other community, we're not perfect. We all have disagreements from time to time. But the overwhelming majority of people that I have met have simply wanted nothing but to help. And that right there is special. And I don't ever want to lose the sight of that. So this podcast exists because of the community. Without the growers, there's no peppers. Without the makers, there's no sauce. And without the organizers, there's no festivals. Without listeners, there's no podcast. Every single person plays a role. And I have been fortunate enough to have the front row seat watching this overall community grow and thrive. I'd like to share something that most people never see. Because when you watch an episode, you may watch it for an hour, maybe 30 minutes, or 45 minutes, whatever the final runtime happens to be. What you don't see is everything that happens before the record button ever is hit. Research, reading, writing, rewriting, fact-checking, emailing guests, scheduling interviews, learning new software, recording, editing, uploading, designing thumbnails, writing titles, optimizing descriptions, creating social media posts, replying to comments, answering emails, planning future episodes, learning how new YouTube is constantly changing their algorithms or whatever social media platform that you want to plug in there is changing their things, and then changing things all over again. Then balancing all of that with running a business, working with clients, serving my community, trying to continue learning, trying to stay healthy, trying to be present with my family, and continuing to grow as a person. It's ultimately a lot. And I don't say that because I'm asking for anyone to feel sorry for me. It's actually quite the opposite. I say that because anything worthwhile usually takes some sacrifice. Whether you are building a business, raising a family, or training for a marathon, starting a garden, or creating a podcast, there are always things that people just never see. What they do see, though, is success. Whatever success looks like for you is usually built during those unseen moments. We're talking about the sacrifices. There's been those nights where everyone else has gone to bed and I'm still there editing or thinking about ways to improve or how I can change something, or maybe thinking back to a comment and trying to figure out how to best bring that to life while keeping true to who I am. Or there's been weekends where friends or family have been asking me to do things, and meanwhile, all I can think about is researching that next episode, trying to figure out what that next topic might be. There have also been evenings where I've had to make difficult decisions. Do I spend another few hours finishing up this project, or do I just walk away and spend time with people that I love? Those aren't always easy decisions, and if I'm being honest, I haven't always gotten the balance of that just completely right. There's been times whenever I am working towards knowing the fact that I am going to be doing something with the family whenever I need to be recording, and I'm stacking up a week's worth of episodes to be recorded out for the next month, and that takes time away from the family. And during that decision, it's not always the best to be able to front load as much. Sure, it pays out later, but it takes away time with family and friends. And that's been one of the biggest life lessons this podcast has really taught me. The passion is incredible, but the passion without balance eventually catches up to you. I've learned that creating something sustainable means protecting the relationships that matter the most. Because at the end of the day, success doesn't mean much if the people closest to you never get to enjoy the journey with you. That lesson has changed how I think about this podcast. It has changed how I think about business. And honestly, it's changed how I think about life. So why have I never quit? There have absolutely been moments where I have questioned whether I should just keep going. Every creator experiences these moments. You realize an episode that you've spent, maybe roughly 20 hours creating and mulling over, and all of a sudden it doesn't reach nearly as many people as you hoped. You start to wonder, is the algorithm burying you? Is it really just kind of buried my overall video? You start to wonder, should I have covered a different topic? Should I had on a different guest? You wonder if people even care. And then out of nowhere, you receive a message. Maybe someone says something like, that episode helped me. Or maybe they tell you that they learned something new from that video. And maybe they just simply thank you for introducing them to a sauce maker that they've never heard of before. Or maybe they tell you, this is exactly what I needed today. Those moments, those messages have kept me going far more than any view count ever has. Because behind every number is an actual person. And if one conversation genuinely helps one person, I'd call that time well spent. Now, everything I have shared so far leads me into one of the biggest questions that I have been asking myself really over the last, past year. If this podcast has always been built around curiosity, then what does the future of this podcast actually look like? That's exactly what I want to explore next. Because while the roots of the swear word will always remain planted firmly in the spicy community, I think it's time for the branches to begin to grow in some directions that are new and exciting. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you've probably noticed something. The conversations have started to change, not overnight, not because I woke up one morning and decided I wanted to have a completely reinvented show going on, but because something kept happening. The more people I interviewed, the more I realized the conversation that stayed with me the longest usually weren't about just the hot sauce itself. They weren't just about the pepper themselves. They weren't always even just about eating that food itself. The conversation had a much bigger impact. They were about people and why someone kept going when things got hard, maybe talking about the failures that nobody saw coming and about overcoming fear, about building a business from scratch, taking those risks, about finding purpose, and about learning from mistakes, about becoming a better version of yourself. And that's when something started to click. Maybe the peppers weren't the destination, but maybe the doorway. I want to make something very clear here. The spicy community isn't going anywhere, not even close. If you've followed me for any length of time, you already know I absolutely love the industry. I love walking into pepper festivals and immediately feeling like I'm surrounded by friends and family. I love watching small businesses launch products that they've poured their heart into. And I love talking to the growers who have spent months nurturing a single crop. I love learning why sauce makers choose one pepper instead of another. And I love discovering the unique ingredients that it takes place in whatever they are crafting, from sauces to powders to spicy snacks. And I love hearing how family recipes that have been passed down from generation to generation have made an impact in today's day and age. And I love hearing stories about companies that almost didn't make it, only to come back even stronger. That's what makes this community so incredible. It's not just the heat, it's about the people behind the heat. And as long as I'm behind this microphone, those stories will always have a place here. The interviews are not stopping. The reviews are not stopping. The festivals are not stopping. The gardening episodes aren't going anywhere. Everything that built this community is still a part of this podcast. In fact, I hope to continue to bring you even more of it because there's still so much of this industry left to explore. So a while back, I found myself asking a question. If someone gives me an hour of their life, how can I make sure they leave better than when they arrived? Not entertained, although I hope that they are, and not just informed, although I hope that they've learned something, but better than that. Maybe they've learned a new gardening technique that saves their pepper crop. Or maybe they've discovered a hot sauce company that they'll support for years. Maybe they hear a guest talk about perseverance and it inspires them to keep going with something that they've been struggling with. Or maybe they hear a health episode and it encourages them to make one small positive change in their life. Or maybe they simply laugh after a really difficult week. If someone spends an hour here, I want that hour to matter because your time matters. And that's whenever I started to realize something. The real mission of this podcast isn't simply to talk about spicy things. The real mission here is to create conversations that improve people's lives. Because sometimes those conversations will involve peppers, and sometimes they'll involve gardening, sometimes they'll involve health, sometimes they'll involve business talk, and sometimes it's a focus on mindset, while others are just going to be creating events viewed through their own lens. Sometimes conversations that make us stop and think, what connects all of these topics isn't just the subject itself, it's curiosity. So curiosity is bigger than capsaicin. One of the things that I love the most about peppers is that they attract curious people. Just think about it. We decided one day, I wonder what the world's hottest pepper tastes like. That's curious people. You know, the ones who decide, I'm going to start growing peppers I've never even heard of before. Again, curious people. Who starts experimenting with fermentation, creating new sauces, breeding peppers, inventing products, or traveling across the country to attend pepper festivals? Curious people do. Curiosity has always been the common ingredient. The pepper is just simply the spark. So why stop there? If curiosity brought us together, then why shouldn't curiosity continue leading us forward? And that's why you've started hearing more episodes about health, about psychology, gardening science, about myths, nutrition, personal growth, about business, about resilience, because all of those things influence our lives. And I genuinely believe that they are worth us talking about. One thing that's incredibly important to me is this. I'm not pretending to have every single answer. Far from it. I'm learning right alongside you. This is one of the reasons why I enjoy creating these episodes so much, is because before I ever sat down to record, I usually spend hours, sometimes days, researching, reading studies, comparing viewpoints, and looking at historical perspectives, trying to understand not only what we know, but what we don't know, because science is continuously evolving. New discoveries happen every year. Sometimes ideas we thought were settled change. Sometimes old practices gain new evidence. And sometimes popular trends disappear because they never had strong evidence to begin with. And that's okay. Learning means being willing to adjust. I never want this podcast to become a place where we pretend certainty exists everywhere. Instead, I'd rather build a place where curiosity is welcomed, where respectful disagreements are welcomed, and where asking good questions is encouraged. I think that's becoming increasingly important in today's world. If I could describe the kind of community I hope this podcast creates, it would probably be something like this: a place where people can disagree without becoming disagreeable, a place where beginners feel welcomed, a place where experts are willing to teach, and a place where companies support one another, a place where creators celebrate each other's wins instead of just competing for attention, and a place where someone can ask what feels like a basic question without feeling embarrassed, because every expert started as a beginner, and every successful company just started with an idea. Every grower killed a few plants along the way, and every content creator published an episode that wasn't very good. Growth comes from trying, not pretending we've already arrived. And that's the kind of culture I want to continue to build. Another thing I'd really like to encourage is healthy discussion. Not arguments, not outrage, just discussion. The internet has become incredibly good at rewarding conflict. The louder someone yells, the more attention they often receive. But I've noticed something. Real growth rarely happens in shouting matches. It usually happens through the conversations, when people actually listen and where people ask questions, where people are willing to admit that I hadn't thought of it in that way. I hope this podcast can continue to be one of those places. If you disagree with something I say, that's okay. Just go ahead and tell me why. Let's learn together. And if I make a mistake, I want to know. If you have additional information, go ahead and share it. That's how communities get stronger. Not by pretending that one person knows everything, but by recognizing that collectively, we know far more than any one individual ever could. I also want to make you a promise. As this podcast continues to grow, I'm going to do my very best to keep this authentic, and I'm not interested in creating drama just to chase views. I'm not interested in manufacturing controversy. I'm not interested in saying outrageous things or acting crazy because the algorithm rewards it. I'd rather grow slowly with people who genuinely care about learning than to grow quickly for the wrong reasons. And that doesn't mean that every episode will be perfect, because it won't. I'll continue making mistakes. I'll continue learning. I'll continue improving. But what I can promise is honesty, curiosity, respect, and a genuine desire to bring you something worthwhile every single time you press play. Because one of my favorite parts about doing this podcast is that many of the best episode ideas didn't actually come from me. They came from you. The questions in the comments, the messages on social media, the emails, the conversations at festivals, the discussions after interviews, and sometimes someone asks what they think is a simple question and it becomes an entire episode. That's one of the reasons I encourage feedback so often. You're helping shape the podcast. You are helping me discover topics I might not have ever thought to explore. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about what I find interesting. It's about creating conversation that serves the overall community. Now, all of this sounds exciting. Expanding conversations, more educational episodes, more interviews, more gardening, more science, more mindset, more community involvement. But here is the reality of it all. Creating that kind of content takes something that's become even more valuable every year, and that's time. Next, I want to go ahead and pull back the curtain even further. I want to talk honestly about what it actually takes to create this podcast, why the schedule has changed, and what I've learned about burnout, how family has shaped my perspective, and why I finally decided to open sponsorship opportunities in the first place, and how every person who has supported this podcast has helped make all of this possible. All right, so if you've made it this far in this episode, first of all, thank you so much. And the conversation has definitely been different than my normal episodes. It's much more personal, it's more reflective, and honestly, it's a conversation that I've wanted to have for quite some time now. Because while many of you know me through this here microphone or through YouTube, or maybe you've met me at Zest Fest or another Pepper Festival, there's a lot that happens behind the scenes that most people will just never see. And today, I want to share just a little bit of that with you. Not because I think that my story is somehow unique, but because I think it's something that many creators, entrepreneurs, and dreamers experience. And maybe you'll see a little bit of your own journey in mine. So when people watch a podcast, it's easy to think that the episode begins the moment the camera starts recording. In reality, that's one of the very last steps. Every podcast starts with an idea. Sometimes it's just a question that someone has asked me. Sometimes it's something that I've noticed while traveling. Sometimes it's a guest that I met months earlier. And sometimes it's a scientific paper that I stumbled across while researching something completely different. One question then turns into 10. 10 questions turn into hours of research. Hours of research turn into pages of notes, and those notes become an outline, and the outline becomes a script, and the script gets rewritten, and the facts get checked, and then adjustments are made again. Only after all of that do I finally sit down in front of the camera, and that's just the beginning. After the recordings, there's editing, there's audio cleanup, video editing, graphics, titles, descriptions, SEO, thumbnails, uploading, scheduling, sharing across platforms, replying to comments, following up with guests, planning the next episode. And then, somewhere in the middle of all of that, life continues. Client work happens. Business responsibilities are dropped at my feet. There's family time, there's church, there's community involvement, there's friends, there's trying to stay healthy, trying to keep learning, and trying to continue growing myself. It's all a balancing act, one that I'm still learning every single week. I think social media has unintentionally created the impression that success happens quickly. People see the finished product, but they don't see is the process. You see a polished episode, but you don't see the late nights. You don't see the technical issues. You don't see recording something twice because the microphone failed or the camera battery went out or whatever the case may be. You don't see spending hours researching a topic to realize it isn't accurate enough to publish. You don't see rewriting an introduction 6 times that doesn't quite feel right. And you don't see wondering if an episode is actually going to help someone. You don't see questioning whether the algorithm is ever going to put it in front of people who actually appreciate it. Those moments happen more often than people realize. And I think that's true for almost every worthwhile pursuit. You usually celebrate the harvest. You rarely celebrate the planning. One thing this podcast has taught me is that passion is a beautiful thing, but passion isn't free. Every hour I spend researching an episode is an hour I can't spend doing something else. Every evening spent editing is an evening I'm not spending somewhere else. Every dollar invested into equipment, software, travel, production is money I could have invested somewhere else. The simple reality, and here's something that I want to be completely transparent about, is for nearly 3 years, I've continued creating this podcast because I genuinely love doing it. Not because it was the easiest business decision, not because it made me rich, not because someone was paying me to keep going. I kept showing up because I believe these conversations matter. And I believe this community matters. And I still do. If you're watching from the beginning, you've probably seen the evolution take place. The equipment has improved, the conversations became deeper, the research became stronger, the production quality increased. None of that happened overnight. It happened one episode at a time, one improvement at a time, one lesson at a time. And I wouldn't trade the journey for anything. There's another group of people I want to recognize today, and that's my family. They're not always in front of the camera, and most of the time, you'll never even see the sacrifices they've made, but they're still real, as well as the first year of only being live, the sacrifices that were made from my producer, Jeff, who was helping me along while we were live, and his family. Those sacrifices are real. And there may have been evenings where I had to choose between editing one more hour or stepping away to simply be present. There have been weekends spent traveling to events, late nights, early mornings, projects that ran longer than they were expected. There have been moments where I looked up at the clock and then I've realized that I've been working on this far longer than I ever planned. And through all of that, my family and friends have continued encouraging me, supporting me, and believing in what I am trying to build. And that doesn't mean that I've always balanced things perfectly. Far from it. I've made mistakes, I've worked too much at times, and I have let projects spill over into personal time. I'm still learning on that. There have been countless times where I have been getting everything ready, having a snafu, trying to upload to YouTube or Spotify or Rumble or Apple Podcasts, and trying to get something out there on time for the podcast to make it. And let's say one of those platforms is having a slow upload day because of just high traffic. That has spilled over into my family's personal time. And I still struggle to end up balancing and finding out that nice mixture there. And one of the lessons that I've learned over the last few years is that success should never come at the expense of the people that you love. Businesses, they can grow. Podcasts can grow. Opportunities will come and go. But time with family, that's something you'll never get back. That perspective has changed the way that I approach the podcast. Not because I care less, but because I care more about building something sustainable. Some of you have noticed something over the past year. Well, for a while. I was producing 2 episodes every week. It was exciting, it was challenging, it was rewarding, but it was also exhausting. As my business continued to grow, as client projects increased, and as life responsibilities expanded, I had to ask myself the difficult question. Would I rather produce more episodes or produce better episodes? And that wasn't an easy decision because I genuinely enjoyed creating content. I love talking with guests and I love researching topics. I love sitting behind this microphone, but eventually I realized quality has to come before quantity. If slowing down slightly means I can bring you better research, stronger conversations, better production, and even more thoughtful episodes, then I think that's the right decision. Does this mean I'll never return to multiple episodes each week? Not at all. In fact, that's something I'd love to do again. I'd love to create more interviews, more educational episodes, more festival coverage, more gardening series, and more live discussions, more behind the scenes kind of content. And the vision has actually gotten quite bigger, not smaller. The challenge isn't ideas, it's time. So this brings me to something that I've been thinking about for quite a while: sponsorships. I want to explain my philosophy here because I think sometimes people hear the word sponsor and immediately think, oh, great, here comes the ads. And that's never been what I wanted the podcast to ever become. And if you're listening for any length of time, you know I'm very selective about what I recommend. This isn't going to change. If a company sponsors this podcast, it's because I genuinely believe they bring value to the community. Whether it's a pepper company, a hot sauce maker, a gardening equipment producer, a business tool, or something that genuinely aligns with the mission of this podcast, I'm not interested in filling episodes with advertisements. I'm interested in building partnerships because here's the reality. Every sponsorship doesn't just help pay for the equipment or software or travel. What it really buys is time. More time to research, more time to interview guests, more time to travel to events, more time to create educational content, more time to improve production quality. In other words, more value to you. That's how I look at sponsorships, not as interruptions, but as investments into making this podcast better. Now, I'd like to speak directly to a very special group of people, the Swear Citizens. Whether you've purchased merchandise, joined the membership, shared an episode, recommended a guest, left a review, or simply continued showing up week after week, thank you so much. Truly, you may not realize it, but every one of those actions matter. Sometimes people think my one purchase probably doesn't make a difference, but it does. My one comment probably won't matter, but it does. My one review won't change anything. It absolutely does. Because communities aren't built by one person. They're built by thousands of small actions from people who believe in something. If you've ever bought a shirt, thank you. If you've ever worn that shirt to a festival, thank you. If you ever told a friend about this podcast, thank you. And if you've ever become a Swear Citizen, thank you. You believed in this podcast enough to support something that I have created. And that means more than I can put into words. I hope you know that I don't take that support for granted. Not for 1 second. So looking ahead, everything that we've talked about today, from the schedule to the sponsorships, the Swear Citizens, the growth, it's all pointed towards one thing: building something that lasts. Not something that burns bright for a year, then disappears. I want to look back 10 years from now and still be having conversations that matter, still learning, still introducing you to incredible people, still asking questions, and still helping curious people discover the incredible world of peppers and all of the other fascinating subjects that connect us. That's the future that I'm working towards. And honestly, I couldn't imagine building it without all of you. So, where do we go from here? What's next for the swear word? What kind of episodes can you expect? All these things start rolling around. How can this community become even stronger? And perhaps the biggest question of all is, what does success actually look like moving forward? So let's wrap this conversation up by talking about the future. As I was preparing for this episode, I kept asking myself one final question. What do I want people to remember when this episode is over? Not what did they learn, not what announcement did I make, not what changed, what I do hope sticks with them. And I think that I found the answer. I hope people remember that curiosity is worth protecting. One thing that I've noticed over the last several years is that curiosity seems to be disappearing. Not everywhere, but in a lot of places. Whether you've become incredibly quick to form opinions, quick to judgment, quick to respond, quick to assume, sometimes before we've even asked a single question even. And that's one of the reasons I enjoy this podcast so much. It forces me to slow down. So before I ever record an episode, I have to ask questions. I have to research. And sometimes I have to realize that what I originally believed was incomplete. Sometimes I find evidence that changes my perspective. And sometimes I discover that there isn't a clear answer at all. And honestly, I think that's okay, because not every question needs an immediate answer. Sometimes questions deserve exploration, and some deserve discussion. Some deserve years of continued research, and that doesn't make us weak. It makes us learners. And I hope that this podcast always remains a place where curiosity comes before certainty, because curiosity is what pushes science forward. It's what creates businesses. It's what leads to innovation. It's what causes someone to plant a pepper they've never even grown before. Start a company that they've always dreamed about, or maybe just finally pursue something that they've been afraid of since the beginning. Curiosity changes lives. So, where does this lead us? What does the future actually look like? Honestly, I'm excited, because I think we're just getting started. Yes, you'll continue seeing interviews from growers, hot sauce makers, pepper breeders, industry leaders, festival organizers, and creators from across the spicy community. Those conversations aren't going anywhere. In fact, I'd like to do even more of them. You'll see more product reviews, festival coverage, gardening episodes, growing techniques, pepper science, capsaicin research, some cooking, some challenges, everything you've come to expect from the swear word. But now, I'm also giving myself permission to follow curiosity wherever it leads. That means episodes about health, about longevity, fitness, mindset, philosophy, psychology, about business, leadership, productivity, and nutrition, about certain events when they intersect with our everyday lives, about books worth reading, about technology that might be shaping the future, about lessons I have learned and lessons I'm still learning. Because at the end of the day, all of those things help shape who we become. And I think that that's worth talking about. Some people may ask, what do those topics have to do with peppers? And my answer is simple: people. Every guest I've interviewed, every business owner, every grower or entrepreneur, creator, parent, friend, is living a life far bigger than peppers alone. The pepper community isn't just connected by capsaicin, it's connected by people. People who are trying to build a better business, better families, better health, better communities, and better lives. If I can create conversations that help with any of those things, then I think I'm staying true to the mission, not moving away from it. So, one thing I hope that you'll remember is that the podcast is growing because I'm growing. If you go back to listen to some of my earlier episodes, you'll probably hear things I do differently than I do today. And I know I do, because I have become a better interviewer, a better researcher, and a better storyteller, a better communicator, and I hope a better person. Not because I arrived, far from it, because I kept learning and because I keep learning. I hope that that never stops. I don't want this podcast to become something predictable. I don't want it to become something comfortable. I want it to continue asking better questions, finding better guests, creating better conversations. That is growth. And I hope that you'll continue growing right alongside me. And another thing that I've realized along the way of making this is that the podcast works even better when it isn't just me talking. Some of my favorite episodes started because one of you asked a question, or challenged something that I said, or suggested a topic, or introduced me to someone that I needed to meet. And that's why I ask for comments. That's why I read messages. And that's why I enjoy meeting listeners at festivals. The podcast has never felt like a one-way broadcast. It's always felt more like an ongoing conversation. And I hope that it always stays that way. So keep sending me questions. Keep challenging ideas respectfully. Keep sharing your experiences. Keep recommending guests. Keep telling me what you would like to learn, because some of the biggest improvements to this podcast have happened because someone in this community cared enough to speak up. And before I wrap this up, I simply want to say thank you. Thank you to every guest who's trusted me with their story. I want to say thank you to every company that has shared products for review. Thank you to every festival that has welcomed me through the gates with a camera in hand. And thank you to every grower who has answered one more question than they probably had time for. Thank you to every hot sauce maker who's poured years of work into a single bottle. And thank you to every listener who's ever watched an episode, left a comment, shared it with a friend, or simply listened during their drive to work. Thank you to everyone who's ever purchased merchandise. Thank you to every Swear citizen who has believed enough in this podcast to financially support it. Thank you to the future sponsors who will see the value in helping this community to continue to grow. And finally, thank you to my family. None of this happens in isolation. Every dream is supported by people who quietly believed in it behind the scenes. And I'm incredibly grateful for mine. I would like to end today with an invitation, not a sales pitch, not an advertisement, an invitation. If this podcast has ever helped you, I would love for you to become part of helping someone else discover it. Maybe that means sharing an episode with a friend. Maybe that means becoming a Swear citizen. Maybe it means becoming a guest. Maybe it means leaving a comment. Maybe it's simply just joining the conversation in the comments. Every single one of those things help, not because of algorithms, although they certainly don't hurt, but because communities grow through people. One conversation at a time, one recommendation at a time, one relationship at a time. I don't know where this journey will take us over the next 3 years. Honestly, that's the part that excites me. There are still thousands of stories waiting to be told, thousands of products waiting to be discovered, thousands of questions waiting to be explored, and thousands of people I haven't had the privilege of meeting yet. I hope the Swear Word continues becoming a place where all of those conversations continue to happen, a place where curiosity is celebrated, where people feel welcome, and where ideas can be explored respectfully, where learning never stops, and where every episode leaves someone just a little better than before they press play. If I can accomplish that, I'll consider this podcast an absolute success. As I get ready to close out today's episode, I want to leave you with one final thought. Almost 3 years ago, I decided to press record. I had no guarantee anyone would watch, no guarantees anyone would even care, no guarantee this would ever become anything more than just simply an idea. But I started anyways, with a nudge from a good friend, and I'm really glad that I did. Because this podcast has introduced me to incredible people. It's opened doors that I never expected. It's challenged me to become a better communicator, a better learner, and a better listener. Most importantly, it's introduced me to all of you. And for that, I'm always grateful. So here's my promise moving forward. I'll continue showing up. I'll continue learning. I'll continue asking questions. I'll continue doing my absolute best to create conversations worth your time. Not because I have all the answers, but because I believe asking better questions is of the most valuable things that we can do. The swear word started because I love spicy food. It continues today because I love curious people. If peppers are what brings us together, then curiosity is what keeps us growing. I got some exciting episodes coming your way, more incredible guests, more deep dives into peppers, into gardening and hot sauces, more science, more health conversations, more practical knowledge, and yes, I have a few surprises I've been working on behind the scenes that I think that you're really going to enjoy. So if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed wherever you are listening. That way you won't ever miss what's coming up next. If today's conversation resonated with you, I'd love for you to do 3 simple things. First, if you're interested in helping support the future of this podcast, consider becoming a Swear Citizen. Your support helps me continue creating more educational episodes, traveling to events, improving production quality, and bringing more value to this incredible community. Second, if you're a business that believes in education, in curiosity, great products, and authentic community, I'd love to have a conversation about sponsorship opportunities, and I'm intentionally looking for partners that align with the values of this podcast and genuinely serve this audience. And third, tell me what you want to hear next. Go ahead, leave a comment, send a message, recommend a guest, ask a question, challenge an idea. This podcast has always been stronger because of the people who participate in it. Speaking of sponsors, I would like to go ahead and take this moment to shout out our current sponsors, podvision.io. If you're looking to grow your brand, start your brand, you've hit a bump in the road, you're trying to figure things out, highly recommend checking out podvision.io for all of those needs, as well as webdx.one. Maybe you have an online site, maybe you had a guy at one point and lost contact, maybe you just never got around to building a website. Highly recommend checking out webdx.one for all of those needs. Best of all, they get you looking great online while you get to focus on what you do best. Thank you for your trust, for your encouragement, your support, and most importantly, for your time. Stay curious, keep learning, keep asking questions, keep growing, and of course, keep bringing the heat. I'm Brandon Swear, and from everything from the world of hot, this has been The Swear Word.